I won't spend a whole lot of time in this class on data visualization, but there are a few concepts that I think are important that I want to emphasize. One of them is histograms. A histogram is a representation of data that shows the frequency of different values within different bins. This is what we tend to think of when we think of the normal distribution and the bell curve. That's really a smoothed out histogram. Along with histograms comes the concept of skew and frequency distributions. The frequency distribution we're most interested in is the normal distribution. That's the bell curve. And skew describes how the mean is affected relative to the median. And when I first started looking at these charts and when I was first introduced to the concept of skew, it seemed to me that it was entirely backward, that the frequency distribution in this figure, letter C, is clearly skewed to the left because that big hump is clearly going to the left. And this figure here, figure D, is clearly skewed to the right because the big hump is going to the right. And for a long time, the way that I remembered skew was that it was just the opposite of what I thought it was supposed to be. However, what skew is really telling you is what's happening to the mean relative to the median. So the reason we say this frequency distribution is skewed to the right is that the mean is getting pulled to the right by these outlying values here on the far right. And the reason figure D is skewed to the left is that the mean is getting pulled to the left by these outlying values. A chart that you may see in the literature that can be a little difficult to interpret is the box and whiskers plot. And it's not always clear what the box and whiskers mean because the whiskers don't always mean the same thing. So the whiskers can be 1.5 times the interquartile range. So from Q1 to Q3, right, the 25th percentile value to the 75th percentile value, that's your interquartile range. You can make your whiskers 1.5 times that. You can make them the minimum and the maximum, or you can make them one standard deviation from the mean. Any of those are possible values that the whiskers can represent. The figure itself should tell you what it means. If you see a box and whiskers plot with outliers, then the most likely is that it's going to be the 75th percentile plus the interquartile range. That's the way that they're defining outliers, is more than the interquartile range plus the 75th percentile, or the 25th percentile minus the interquartile range. These areas here are the outliers. If there are no outliers, it's possible that they're using the box and whiskers to show the min and the max. Now, the box and whiskers can also be used to show that your data is skewed. So if your data is skewed, you're going to expect to have data hanging out beyond the 25th percentile or beyond the 75th percentile. So if your box and whiskers is relatively evenly distributed left and right, that implies there's no skew or little skew. The further your box is towards the 25th percentile, the more skewed you are to the right. The more your box is pushed towards the 75th percentile, the more skewed you are to the left.